Once upon a time, in the heart of a bustling African city, there lived a young university student named Precious. She was as bright as the morning sun with an infectious smile that could light up any room she walked into. But despite her beauty and charm, Precious was not content with what she had. She was always yearning for more, always wanting to be someone else, someone better in her eyes. Precious had a peculiar habit. She loved to imitate others. If a friend wore a beautiful dress, oh, Precious would borrow it. If another styled her hair in a trendy way, Precious would find a way to copy it. She borrowed clothes, shoes, and even wigs from her friends. The only thing left for Precious to borrow was people's undies. I know, right? All in the hopes of feeling belonged and more admired. Her friends, though, were not blinded by her antics. They often gossiped about her behind her back, laughing at how shamelessly she would ask to borrow things, never seeming to care that she didn't own them herself. They even went as far as nicknaming her Oloju Kokoro, meaning someone who is never satisfied. But Precious was unfazed by their whispers. She continued on, living her life as though nothing could touch her, least of all the opinions of others. One day, the small off-campus hostel where Precious lived buzzed with excitement. A new student had moved into the room opposite Precious's room. Her name was Njideka, and she was a vision of beauty, tall and elegant. Njideka had a grace about her that drew people in. Her skin was the color of rich cocoa, and her hair, when not hidden under her collection of stunning wigs, was a crown of thick curled curls. Njideka was not just beautiful, but she was always known for impeccable taste. She had a wardrobe full of the latest fashion, from shimmering dresses to perfectly tailored pants, and her jewelry sparkled like the stars. But what caught the attention of the girls in the hostel most were Njideka's wigs. Each one was more beautiful than the last. Long, flowing locks, coily bobs, and even colorful braids. The wigs seemed to have a life of their own, each one enchanting Njideka's beauty in a different way. The girls in the hostel admired Njideka. They envied her beauty, her fashion sense, and her ability to turn heads wherever she went. But none admired her more than Precious. From the moment she laid eyes on Njideka, Precious was captivated. She longed to befriend her, to be close to her, and most of all, to live like her. Precious imagined her life wearing Njideka's clothes, her jewelry, and of course her wigs. The thought of it consumed her. Precious decided that she had to find a way to become Njideka's friend, and so she devised a plan. One afternoon, she spent hours in the small kitchen of the hostel, preparing a meal that was sure to impress. She made a large pot of jollof rice, and the kind that was rich in flavor. With just the right amount of spices, she fried chicken to a golden brown, crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. When everything was ready, Precious carefully packed the food into a tray and made her way to Njideka's room. Njideka was surprised when she opened the door to find Precious standing there, smiling broadly with a tray of food in her hand. Immediately Precious laid eyes on Njideka. She was immediately mesmerized by her beauty and elegance. The rich smell of her perfume traveled to Precious's nose, overshadowing the aroma of jollof rice she brought. What captivated Precious the most was the array of beautiful, colorful wigs, clothes, and shoes that she could see in Njideka's room through the open door. Even the hair on Njideka's head was very beautiful and luxurious, made of the softest, silkiest hair Precious had ever seen. "Oh my God, you're so beautiful!" Precious said to Njideka as she stared at her in awe. Njideka, confused by the appearance of uninvited guests at her doorstep, smiled awkwardly in appreciation as her eyes questioned Precious's presence. "Sorry, love, I just wanted to welcome you to our hostel," Precious said sweetly. "I made some jollof rice and fried chicken. I hope you like it." Njideka's eyes lit up. That's so thoughtful of you. Please come in. Precious stepped into Njideka's room, which was just as beautiful as she imagined. The walls were decorated with posters of fashion icons, and the air was filled with the scent of Njideka's perfume, a delicate floral fragrance that lingered in the room. But what caught Precious's eyes was the wig sitting on a stand prettily. Precious had never seen a wig that perfect in her life. The hair cascaded down in loose wavy curls. Its natural shine that seemed almost magical captured Precious's heart. With a wide smile, Precious silently applauded herself for making the decision to be friends with the new girl, if not for anything but for this week. It was a long flowing wig made of the softest, silkiest hair she had ever seen. The hair cascaded down in loose waves. As they sat down to eat, the two girls began to talk. They spoke about the school, their courses, and the challenges of university life. Njideka was impressed by Precious's warmth and friendliness. She hadn't expected such a warm welcome from everyone, let alone from someone who seemed as genuine as Precious. By the time the meal was over, Njideka felt a deep sense of connection with Precious. She had found a friend in this new place, and for that she was grateful. From that day on, Njideka became inseparable with Precious. They went everywhere together, studying in the library, shopping at the market, and even attending social events on campus. Precious was overjoyed she finally had the chance to live the life she had always dreamed of, even if it was just by being close to Njideka. But despite all the time they spent together, there was one thing Precious wanted more than anything else: the wig that captivated her sight the first day she visited Njideka with the tray of jollof rice. Precious had seen many beautiful wigs in her lifetime, but none as stunning as the one she'd first noticed that day. The day that followed was filled with Precious's desperate need to wear Njideka's wig and own it. She began by borrowing little clothes from Njideka and jewelries and borrowing some wigs. But she imagined herself wearing that particular wig she saw on Njideka's dresser that day, feeling its soft strands brush against her cheek and seeing how it would transform her entire appearance. She knew she had to have it no matter what. One day, when she was alone in Njideka's room, Precious finally gathered the courage to ask, Angie, please, can I borrow that wig? She asked, trying to sound casual as she pointed to the wig on the dresser. Njideka looked up from her book, surprised by the request. She had always been generous with her things, but that particular wig was different. It had been a gift from her grandmother, a woman known for her knowledge of ancient traditions and powerful charms. Njideka had never worn it out of respect, but she had always kept it close, sensing that it was more than just a beautiful accessory. Njideka hesitated. Oh, precious, I'm not sure I can lend you that one. It's very special, but I have other wigs you can borrow, you know. You would really like them. Or okay, tomorrow I could order this exact same wig for you, but please, I can't give you this one. But Precious was not satisfied. She wanted that wig and nothing else would do. She began to plead with Njideka, her eyes wide with desperation. Please, Njideka, I will take care of it. I promise. I just want to wear it for one day, just to see how it feels. Njideka noticed how Precious longed for the wig. It was clear in the way she gazed at it, her eyes full of desire, but despite that, Njideka couldn't bring herself to hand it over. This wasn't just any wig. It had been in her family for as long as she could remember. Growing up, Njideka had often asked why no one ever wore it, why it was always kept so close but never used. Her family's answer were always vague. They would say she would understand when she was older. Now, holding the wig, Njideka felt its weight, realizing it was more than just an accessory. It carried something significant, something she wasn't sure she was ready to let go of. After thinking of it, Njideka decided to decline Precious's request, offering other wigs instead, but Precious wasn't interested. Frustrated, she stormed out of Njideka's room, slamming the door behind her. Precious stormed back to her hostel that night, fuming with anger. She accused Njideka of being selfish and arrogant, pacing across her room as she cursed Njideka for making her feel humiliated. After all the pleading, only to be turned down, she thought. She felt bitter and embarrassed. The more she thought about it, the more she wanted revenge, and to somehow get the wig for herself. The next morning, Precious decided on a different approach. She prepared a peace offering and went to Njideka, apologizing for her behavior the night before. Njideka, always calm and forgiving, embraced her warmly and explained why she couldn't part with the wig. She even gave Precious a similar one as a gesture of goodwill. Precious accepted it, smiling as if she'd made peace, but Njideka had no idea that Precious had other plans in mind. The next day, Precious ventured into a notorious part of the campus, a place where students who were more interested in quick money than their studies hung out. She paid a group of them to break into her hostel that night and steal from Njideka. Later that evening, Precious followed her usual routine, visiting Njideka's room to study and spend time together. They stayed up late, and just past midnight, as they were drifting off to sleep, a soft bang echoed through the door. Confused about who might be visiting at such a strange hour, they hesitated before finally deciding to open the door. As soon as they did, they were roughly dragged back into the room by the boys Precious had hired. The intruders quickly ransacked the place, taking most of Njideka's wigs, including the mysterious wig Precious desperately wanted, and some jewelries, leaving the guests terrified and in shock. In the days that followed, Njideka struggled to cope with the trauma of that night, trying to piece her life back together. Meanwhile, Precious finally had what she wanted all along. She sold most of the wigs and jewelry stolen from Njideka except for the mysterious wig. That one she took to a hairstylist, instructing them to revamp and recolor it to disguise its appearance. When the newly rebranded wig was finally ready, Precious was thrilled. She received it with trembling hands, her heart racing with excitement. All she could think about was wearing it and flaunting it for everyone to see. Precious couldn't wait to wear the newly revamped wig. The next morning, she carefully styled her hair, placing the wig on her head with a sense of triumph. It fit perfectly, and when she looked in the mirror, she saw a version of herself she always dreamed of, glamorous, confident, and admired. She walked through the campus, head turned. People complimented her on her new look, and Precious basked in their attention. As the day wore on, strange things started to happen. It began with a faint itch on her scalp. She tried to ignore it, but the itching grew more intense, spreading across her head like wildfire. By the evening, the irritation was unbearable, and she couldn't stop scratching at her scalp, her nails digging into her skin. That night, as she lay in bed, Precious' dreams were haunted by unsettling images. In the darkness, she saw shadowy figures with hollow eyes, whispering in a language she couldn't understand. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until she jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The room was eerily quiet, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. The following day became a nightmare. The itch turned into a burning sensation, and her scalp began to blister and swell. Precious's once proud reflection in the mirror now terrified her. Her hair started to fall out in clumps, leaving patches of raw, exposed skin. Worse still, she began hearing voices, soft, taunting whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. They echoed in her mind, growing louder whenever she tried to remove the wig. Desperate and terrified, Precious tried to take the wig off, but it wouldn't budge. It felt as though it had fused with her scalp, tightening its grip each time she tugged at it. Panicked, she sought out the hairstylist who had altered the wig, demanding that they removed it. But the stylist, upon seeing the state of Precious's scalp and the way the wig seemed to have grown into her skin, recoiled in horror, refusing to touch it. As the days turned into weeks, Precious's condition worsened. Her once vibrant skin grew pale and gaunt, her eyes hollow and sunken. The wig had become a living nightmare, tightening its hold on her both physically and mentally. She began to isolate herself, afraid of what others might see, but also terrified of the dark, crippling sensation that seemed to be consuming her from inside. One night, as she lay in her bed, too exhausted to move, the voices became clearer. No longer just whispers, they spoke to her directly, telling her things she didn't want to hear, secrets, regrets, and fears that she had buried deep down within her. They mocked her vanity, her greed, and her betrayal. The voices told her that the wig was cursed, and that she was now born to it just as it was born to her. In a fit of desperation, Precious grabbed a pair of scissors, attempted to cut the wig off, but as soon as the blades touched the hair, a soaring pain shot through her skull, so intense that she collapsed to the floor, whining in agony. The scissors fell from her hand and the room seemed to spin around her, the walls closing in. As she lay there, barely conscious, the voices whispered one final chilling message. You wanted beauty at all costs. Now you would wear the wig forever, 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 and it will wear you. Precious couldn't bear the agony any longer. The pain on her scalp had become unbearable, and she could feel something far worse than physical discomfort crippling into her mind, a darkness that groaned at her sanity. Desperate and terrified, she burst out of her room into the hostel compound, her face twisted in torment. Students who were milling around turned to look at her in shock. Precious, usually so composed and proud, was now disheveled, her eyes wide with fear. Her skin had taken a pale, sickly horror, and her once vibrant spirit seemed drained. Unable to hide her suffering anymore, she began to scream, confessing everything, the lies, the theft, and the cost of the wig. I stole from Njideka, Precious cried, her voice cracking with despair. I paid those boys to take her things, to take the wig. I wanted it so badly. But now it's killing me. I can't move. I can't do anything. I keep hearing voices in my mind and I can't take it off. Please take it off. Her words sent a wave of disbelief and horror through the crowd of students who had never seen her in such a state. The whispers quickly spread across the hostel. Some students hurried to call Njideka, who had been away for a few days after the incident at her hostel, while others watched in stunned silence as Precious continued her frantic confession. Njideka, miles away, was in her grandmother's hut when she received the call. Hearing about Precious's condition, she knew it was more than just regret that was tormenting her friend. It was the cause of the wig. Her grandmother, hearing the urgency in Njideka's voice, finally decided to tell her the full story about the wig. The wig is not just a family heirloom, her grandmother began. It is an ancient artifact meant to reveal the true nature of its wearers. If your heart is pure, the wig brings forth your deepest desires and manifests goodness. But if your heart is tainted with greed, envy, and malice, it will turn those dark desires into your worst nightmare. Njideka listened in stunned silence as her grandmother explained how the wig, once touched, bonds itself to its owner. The wig follows its owner, feeding off their emotions. It is dangerous, my daughter. I tell you, it is dangerous. It must be handled carefully. Go back, Njideka. Go back. The only way to free Precious is to take the wig from her. Her grandmother finished, urging Njideka to go back. Without wasting any time, Njideka rushed back to the campus. When she arrived, the sight of Precious was even more horrifying than she had imagined. Precious was very recognizable. Her face was gaunt, her skin a sickly gray, and her eyes, once full of life, were now hollow and vacant. The wig, which had once been an object of beauty and desire, now seemed to pulse with a dark, sinister energy. Okay. Judeka approached cautiously. With every step, the weight of the situation pressed down on her. The crowd of students parted, giving her a clear path to Precious. They watched in silence, their breath held as Njideka reached out to the wig. As soon as her fingers made contact with the cursed object, she felt a surge of energy course through her. The wig seemed to resist at first, clinging to Precious's scalp tightly, but Njideka held firm, pulling it free. The moment the wig left Precious's head, her body slumped forward as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulder. The color began to return to her skin, and her breathing became more even. Though she remained weak and unconscious, Njideka stared at the wig in her hands, feeling the malevolence it harbored. It had consumed Precious's vitality, turning her vanity into a weapon against herself. But now, with the wig removed, the curse had been broken, at least for Precious. As she looked around at the shocked faces of her fellow students, Njideka understood the true power of the wig and why her family had always kept it hidden. She knew now that it was not something to be trifled with, not something that could be worn for mere beauty or vanity. The wig was a mirror reflecting the darkest corner of a human soul, and it had to be kept out of reach. With a careful hand, Njideka wrapped the wig in a cloth and placed it in a box. She would return it to her grandmother where it would be hidden away once more, never to be used again. As Njideka left the hostel, the weight of the event pressed on in her heart. The campus was quiet, the air thick with the gravity of what had transpired. Precious would recover, but the memory of what had happened would linger in her brain. The story of the cursed wig became a cautionary warning to all about the dangers of letting one's darkest desires take hold, and the dangers of envy, greed, and the pursuit of vanity at the expense of integrity and relationships.